The Oscars have just announced a new category. It's going to be called Popular Film, or at least that's what they're calling it right now. This is going to be the first new category that the Oscars have created since 2002's Best Animated Movie category. I personally am not glad to hear about this, just like I wasn't glad to hear about the Best Animated Film category, and I'll get into that in just a moment. When I first heard about this category, I thought that they were just thinking about it or considering it, but now I've found out that this is something they actually want to do. There is this misconception that Hollywood never honors the blockbusters, and this is untrue. Star Wars was nominated for Best Picture. Titanic was nominated for Best Picture. I've already heard a lot of opinions voiced over the internet that this decision smacks of desperation, and I can kind of see that. Viewership for the Oscars has dropped off considerably, especially last year, and many of the opinions that I've read are basically saying that this is the Oscars' attempt to get the mass audience back in by having a category where the Mission Impossible films or the Transformer films can be nominated for something beyond a Technical Achievement Award. But growing up, I've always respected the Oscars a lot more than the Grammys. I always felt like the Grammys were nothing more than a popularity contest. Whoever sold the most albums got the Grammy. But with the Oscars, it was very different. The biggest selling movies didn't always win. Now, sometimes they did, sure. You know, films like The Godfather that did well at the box office could also do well at the Oscars. But oftentimes the Oscars would nominate for Best Picture and oftentimes give the award to Best Picture to films that were neglected at the box office but merited attention for artistic achievement. And this has been shown time and time again with the Oscars. Year after year, I've seen them shed light on deserving films, and those films gained a lot more popularity as a result. Now, while I do have a lot of respect for the Oscars, they're far from perfect. Genre films like science fiction and fantasy and horror have been for decades pretty much locked out when it comes to winning Best Motion Picture, although there are those few rare exceptions where they get nominated. In fact, the glass wall finally broke with the Lord of the Rings trilogy after Return of the King was released, and they finally won Best Motion Picture. The Lord of the Rings had been nominated for Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers. I don't feel it was appropriate to give them a Best Picture at that point because the trilogy wasn't finished. But once it was finished, they did give it to The Lord of the Rings. And that was really the first time that the glass ceiling had broken for science fiction and fantasy films. So yes, I do get the whole smacks of desperation, smacks of pandering line of thought. Definitely there's some truth to that. But that's not the reason why I really dislike the creation of this category. The main reason why I dislike this category is for the same reason that I disliked the creation of the Best Animated Film category in 2002. Now, that category was created right after Beauty and the Beast was nominated for Best Motion Picture. I think on some level that really frightened the Oscar award organization proper, and I want to stress the actual organization, not the voting membership. The voting membership voted in Beauty and the Beast to become Best Motion Picture. It's the actual organization itself, I think, that was frightened by this, the idea that a cartoon might actually win Best Motion Picture. And so right after that Oscar season was over, the very next year they created the Best Animated Film category. And while some may argue that that category allows more animated films to be honored by getting more nominations to animated films, I personally felt like that category was created to ghettoize animation from ever being able to get a Best Picture nomination again and to make sure that an animated film never wins Best Motion Picture. So I feel that this popular film category is kind of meant to do the same thing. I feel like it's meant to ghettoize genre films like science fiction, fantasy, horror, superhero movies These tend to be the blockbuster movies. These tend to be the popcorn movies. These tend to be the big popular box office movies. But in the same way that just because you didn't make a lot of money doesn't mean you aren't good, just because you did make a lot of money doesn't mean you aren't good either. The Dark Knight was not just a great superhero film, it was just a great film. And it was snubbed from getting a Best Picture nomination. And I think it has to do with the fact that it's a Batman movie. Even with Stanley Kubrick in the director's chair, 2001: A Space Odyssey could not get a Best Picture nomination. And I think there's still this prejudice within the organization of the Oscars against these type of motion pictures, and I feel like this category is once again meant to ghettoize them so that science fiction, fantasy, superhero films can never get a Best Picture nomination and never win Best Motion Picture. I want to add, there has been nothing stated that just because you win in the popular film category doesn't mean you couldn't get nominated in a Best Picture category. But I think that will be the result. Basically, the Oscars will say, hey, it already won popular film. You know, we wanted to honor something else in Best Motion Picture. And while I'm on this subject, I should also mention that comedies rarely ever get nominated for Best Motion Picture, and very rarely, if they do, ever win. So what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know what you think about this. As always, if you like what I do, please click subscribe and be sure to click the notifications bell icon so you can know when I release new videos. Thanks everybody for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.